One of the most famous defeats in American military history lasted less than an hour. More than 200 US soldiers rode into battle under a man who believed he was chasing a fleeing enemy. Instead, they disappeared into one of the largest indigenous camps ever assembled on the Great Plains. Not one soldier from George Custer's immediate command survived to explain what happened. By the end of this story, you'll understand how the Sioux, Northern Cheyenne, and their allies turned a desperate fight for their way of life into a victory that shocked the United States. In June of 1876, the northern plains of North America were changing fast. The US government wanted native nations confined to reservations. Gold had been discovered in the Black Hills, land that had been recognized as Sioux territory only a few years earlier. Thousands of miners flooded in anyway. Many Lakota Sioux bands refused to move. Some remained free, following the buffalo across the plains just as their ancestors had for generations. Among them were leaders whose names would become legendary. Sitting Bull, a respected spiritual and political leader, and Crazy Horse, a young war leader known for his courage, skill, and refusal to seek personal glory. What happened next would become one of the most studied battles in American history. But the story did not begin with a battle. It began with a gathering. During the spring of 1876, Native families from many bands came together near the Little Bighorn River in present-day Montana. They were not gathering to fight. Most were there because it was a good place to hunt, trade, celebrate, and spend time with relatives. The village grew larger and larger. Lakota bands arrived, Northern Cheyenne groups arrived. Some Arapaho families joined as well. Historians estimate the population may have reached between 7,000 and 10,000 people. That made it far larger than US military leaders expected. And that misunderstanding would change everything. Military planners believed they were hunting scattered groups of native warriors. Instead, they were approaching an enormous community filled with families, horses, and hundreds, perhaps thousands, of fighting men. The US Army launched a campaign from multiple directions. The goal was simple: find the non-reservation bands and force them onto reservation. One of the commanders chosen for the mission was Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer. Custer was already famous. He had built his reputation during the American Civil War. He was aggressive, confident, and sometimes reckless. As his column moved toward the Little Bighorn, scouts warned that the native village ahead appeared unusually large. But Custer faced a difficult decision. If he waited, the camp might scatter. If he attacked immediately, he risked charging into something he did not fully understand. He chose speed. And here is the first major surprise. The battle almost never happened the way most people imagine. Many people picture a carefully planned native ambush. But evidence suggests something different. The village was caught off guard. Families were cooking, resting, and going about daily life when soldiers appeared nearby. At first, confusion spread through the camp. Then the alarm went out. Warriors rushed to defend their families. What followed was not a trap. It was a rapid, chaotic mobilization. Custer divided his regiment into several separate groups. He believed he was attacking a village that would break apart under pressure. Instead, each division found itself facing stronger resistance than expected. Major Marcus Reno attacked the southern end of the village. His men were quickly forced back. What began as an offensive turned into a retreat. Some soldiers crossed the river in panic. Others became separated. Several were killed during the withdrawal. The battle was already going badly. But Custer still did not know the full scale of the problem. The village was not collapsing. It was fighting back. And now, hundreds of warriors were moving toward the threat. Accounts from native participants describe riders gathering from across the camp. Some had already fought Reno. Others now turned north toward Custer. Among them was Crazy Horse. Crazy Horse remains one of the most fascinating figures in Indigenous history. Unlike many famous leaders, he left behind few photographs and sought little attention. Much of what we know comes from oral histories and the recollections of people who knew him. According to many Lakota accounts, he possessed an unusual ability to remain calm in battle. He focused less on personal heroics and more on understanding movement, timing, and opportunity. As the fighting intensified, those qualities became critical because the battlefield itself was changing minute by minute. Then came the second major reversal. Custer expected native warriors to defend and retreat. Instead, increasing numbers began attacking aggressively. Every minute brought more fighters. The very size of the village that Custer had underestimated now worked against him. Warriors could rotate in and out. Fresh riders continued arriving. The soldiers could not. Historians continued debating the exact sequence of events. No survivor from Custer's immediate command left an account, but archaeology and native testimony helped paint a picture. Custer's companies became fragmented. Small groups attempted to hold different ridges and hills. As pressure increased, those positions became harder to maintain. Rather than one dramatic last stand, the battle may have consisted of several desperate fights unfolding across the landscape. At some point, momentum shifted completely. What had begun as an attack became a struggle for survival. Warriors identified weaknesses. They maneuvered around exposed positions. They used terrain effectively. And they recognized something important. The soldiers were no longer advancing. They were trapped. According to many native accounts, Crazy Horse played a crucial role during this phase. Several oral traditions describe him helping lead charges that overwhelmed portions of Custer's force. Historians differ on the precise details, but there is broad agreement that Lakota and Cheyenne leadership proved highly effective throughout the battle. This was not a random victory. It was a result of experience, coordination, and adaptation under pressure. The warriors fighting that day were defending families, homes, and a way of life already under enormous threat. Within a remarkably short period of time, Custer's command ceased to exist. More than 200 men were dead. Custer himself was among them. The news stunned the United States. A famous military officer had been defeated. An entire command had been destroyed, and it had happened against a people many Americans wrongly assumed were already defeated. But here is the final twist. The victory at Little Bighorn did not secure long-term freedom for the Sioux and their allies. In some ways, it accelerated the pressure against them. The US government responded with greater determination. Military campaigns intensified. Buffalo populations continued collapsing. Resources became harder to find. Over the following years, many native groups were forced onto reservations. Crazy Horse eventually surrendered in 1877. Later that year, he died while in military custody under circumstances that remain deeply painful in Lakota memory. Sitting Bull fled north into Canada for a time before eventually returning. The military victory had been real, but the larger struggle was far from over. Today, the story of Little Bighorn is remembered in many different ways. For decades, popular culture focused almost entirely on Custer, but modern historians increasingly recognize the battle as a story of Indigenous leadership, strategy, and resistance. The descendants of those who fought there are still here. The Lakota, Dakota, Nakota, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho nations continue to preserve languages, traditions, and histories that long predate the battle itself. Little Bighorn was not the end of a people. It was one chapter in a much longer story. And the answer to our opening question is this. Custer's army disappeared because it rode into a battle it fundamentally misunderstood. It underestimated the size of the village. It underestimated the number of warriors. And it underestimated the ability of Indigenous nations to organize, adapt, and fight for their future. For one extraordinary day in June 1876, the balance of power shifted on the Great Plains. Yet, perhaps the most interesting question is what happened afterward. Because after Little Bighorn, the Sioux faced an even harder challenge than winning a battle. They had to find a way to survive a changing world while holding on to who they were. And that story may be even more remarkable than the victory itself. If you enjoyed this documentary, you'll find many more stories like it here on Yindaru, where we explore the empires, civilizations, indigenous nations, and historical events that continue to shape our world today. If there's another people, battle, or forgotten civilization you'd like us to cover, let us know in the comments. We read every suggestion. And if you don't want to miss the next journey into history, subscribe to Yindaru and join us for the next chapter. Until then, thank you for watching.